What are your top 5 most burning questions about moving to the Seattle area? Well, I found out, and today I'm going to answer them. That's right. Today I'm taking the top 5 most frequently asked questions about moving to Seattle and answering them with my own little spin as a native Seattleite. For those of you who are new to my channel, welcome, welcome. I'm Emily Cressey. I grew up in this area just north of Seattle in the burbs, and I've lived here, worked here for most of my life, took a little trip to North Carolina for college, and now I'm back. So in this channel, I'm really helping people who are relocating to the Seattle area get an idea of what Seatown is all about. Yes, the Emerald City has a lot to offer, but there are certainly some components of its character, its charms that may not be as appealing to everyone. So today we're going to get down into it and see what makes Seattle tick, what questions you have. And remember, if you don't get your question answered, maybe it was number 6 on my list, make sure you type it into the comments below. I love getting comments. I read all of those, and I will do my best to answer each and every one. If you're one of those folks that just writes to say how beautiful I am and that you want to be friends, you can write that too, but I am going to take that with a grain of salt. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing your comments and can't wait to hear from you, all your questions. If we get a lot, maybe I'll make another video answering those as well. So with no further ado, let's jump in to the top 5 questions about moving to Seattle. So there are a couple of different categories of people who are moving to Seattle. Number 1 is people who know that they are moving. And so if you have gotten a job here, if you have family here, if you've always lived here, for example, you know that you're coming to Seattle, you are in one category of people, and I love you and buy a house from me. Okay, so the other category of people are who we're going to be addressing a little bit more today, which is the people that aren't quite sure yet if they're moving to Seattle or not. Maybe they're considering looking for a job here. Maybe they're evaluating Seattle and some other cities. So just trying to give these folks a sense of what it is that they're getting themselves into before they dip their toe in the water and decide to try it out. So the first question that I'm going to answer is, why should I not move to Seattle? What are some buzzer things that would just be deal breakers why you might not want to move here? And if these are on your list and they scare you away, then it's good. And I'm putting them at the beginning so you don't even have to watch the rest of the video. So the biggest reasons not to move to Seattle, I think there are a couple of big ones. Number 1, high cost of living. It's very expensive to live here. Number 2, the weather is gray in the winter. If you don't like rain, if overcast, cloudy skies make you feel kind of depressed, if you already suffer from seasonal affective disorder and depression somewhere else, then that could be a big concern for you as well. It's a car city. If you want a walkable city like Manhattan, this is not the place for you. Number 4, it's very liberal. So in terms of politics and that type of a thing, if you are a MAGA hat wearing conservative, be brave if you come here, because you're going to get a lot of flack and pushback, and people aren't going to like that. The Seattle freaks. So people have a reputation of not being very friendly. And I think part of it is that there aren't the long established communities here that there are in a lot of other places. Actually, I believe less than half of the Seattle population was born and raised in this area like I am. We have a lot of influx, people coming in and out for jobs from other parts of the country and other parts of the world. So there's a real potpourri of different cultures, languages, longevity of stay. So, if you're only going to be here for a couple years, you might not put down roots, and we don't have that shared glue that sticks us together, like everyone is here and it's a college town, or everyone is here and it's a military town. It's a very diverse area with a lot of employers, a lot of spread out geography, and a lot of different cultures. And so finding your people that you really connect with, that you really want to do life together with, is an important priority. If you're an extrovert, if you're people who need people, which are the luckiest people in the world, you need to put some effort into making friends in the Seattle area. So those are, I would say, some of the big reasons that you might want to consider not moving here. Number 2, what are some of the best reasons to move to Seattle? Now, I would say the 2 biggest ones that come to my mind are jobs and the beautiful surrounding areas. So Seattle has lots of major employers, big companies, high-paying companies. I just did a video on jobs and companies that you can click over to and watch after this. But we have a lot of employment opportunities here. So if one spouse is coming for a job and the other will need to find work, no problem. You have a lot of demand. You have colleges, you have law firms, you have tech company, you have hospitals, you have businesses, finance, management, HR, all of those different kinds of things all over the place. So unlike some towns that are kind of a one-trick pony, we do it all, and we do it all very well at a very high level. I think probably one of the biggest drivers of people moving to the area is work. You want to get a good job. You want to get a high-paying job. You want to be in a big city that has access to all of the urban metro things and is also surrounded by a beautiful wilderness area. Seattle is a top pick. Plus, it doesn't really get that cold here. Yes, we have snow every once in a while. You can see my playing in the snow video and talk about how the city shuts down when it snows. But really, that's a very small part of our winter season. It's kind of like a big deal, like a day off from work. So for the most part, if you don't like snow, if you're tired of shoveling, no problem, come here. And I would also add, secretly, this is a secret I don't tell just everybody, we have some of the best summers in the world. My dad grew up in the Midwest, and it was hot, humid, buggy, poison ivy, all sorts of problems. You come here, it's like a Mediterranean climate. It's dry, blue sky, 75 degrees. Go to the beach, go hiking. It's just so nice. So you should come here for the summers, if nothing else. And the winters aren't that bad, especially if you stay busy and find some ways to exercise, get your vitamin D, get your sauna on, soak in some light with a vacation to Hawaii every now and then, and you will be fine. I mentioned at the beginning of this segment that the great outdoors is one of the other big reasons to come to Seattle, and I want to harp on that a little bit more. We are surrounded. If you look at our map, you'll see we have Lake Washington and Puget Sound. Those are our big bodies of water. We have all sorts of other lakes too. Green Lake is a fun little 3-mile walking loop around that lake. There's Lake Union, which has float planes take off and sailboats and houseboats. We have beautiful bodies of water all around the Seattle area, highlighted by 2 mountain ranges, one on each side of us. We have the Olympic Mountains on the west and the Olympic Peninsula. We have the Cascade Mountains to the east. And then south of us, we have Mount Rainier, which is the mountain. If the mountain is out, it looks south. It's the clear skies looking over at Mount Rainier. And so when I have relatives come in from Milwaukee, which is flat as a pancake, they are just in awe of these beautiful mountains. I actually talked with someone who sold his property up here and moved down to Florida. And I said, well, are you glad you moved? What do you miss? He said his wife really noticed that she had a lot more trouble navigating because you don't always have a lake or a body of water on the horizon to kind of orient you. So we really enjoy our mountains and water. We have woods. Lots and lots of people enjoy hiking, cross-country skiing, downhill skiing, as well as water sports like water skiing, jet skiing, canoeing, kayaking, crew where you row with a team of people, boating, fishing, crabbing, all sorts of things. Our friends just bought a boat. They have it parked on Lake Washington. I can't wait to go out and do some tanning and some fishing and some eating and some drinking out on their boat. Everything's more fun on the water. So if you like any of those ways to get out and spend time outside, It's fabulous. I personally go in for gardening. I like to stay at home and grow beautiful roses and vegetables and raspberries and blueberries and all the things, all the crops that you might want to grow do really well out here, with perhaps the exception of the extreme heat loving crops like tomatoes and peppers. It's hard to get enough heat on those things to really ripen them up. So people stick with the small, like cherry tomatoes, globe tomatoes. You get a million of those. If you're trying to do like a 100-day beefsteak tomato, go to Georgia. Okay, so so those are some of the things that I think are really compelling as far as reasons that you would or would not like the area. Now, when I look on Reddit, one of the things that they talk about there, in addition, is sort of this question of crime. And some people think it's really accelerated a decline since COVID. I think it was starting to go downhill a little bit before that. But in Seattle itself, the Seattle city area, especially concentrated in the downtown and near the University District, we have currently been having a lot of problems with things like drug use, tent camping, mental health issues. I think those are all tied together. Prostitution, vandalism, like graffiti and that type of a thing. I don't feel like this is a particularly dangerous city. There was like a shooting one time and it was on the news and everybody sheltered in their buildings, but that's kind of the exception rather than the rule. The people on Reddit arguably didn't think there were any like no-go areas in Seattle where I would not feel safe going here. And other people argued that they did feel that there were some, especially in the downtown Seattle area. So it depends on your perspective and your idea of safety. I certainly wouldn't go to every area by myself as a woman at night, but I think for the most part, areas that are populous and touristy tend to have cleaned out and cleared out and ready to go, but you can still feel like it's a little bit of oppression to just know like, oh, like those girls are prostitutes, or oh, there's a lot of graffiti on here and it hasn't been cleaned off. It can kind of just bring the vibe down a little bit. I know a lot of cities on the West Coast are dealing with this right now. So there is some motion and some momentum and some noise being made about cleaning things up, which I think would be a really big plus. But, we're not Chicago or something where there's 10 shootings every weekend either. I don't see a lot of big problems like that, but there are some areas that, give you a little bit of a weird vibe. So as you're thinking about coming here and moving to the area, just make sure you do your due diligence, talk with your real estate agent. I'd be happy to be your real estate agent if that would be of service. We can have this conversation one-on-one. And also, I really suggest that you come and visit. So my third question is how to get an idea of what Seattle is like before you actually come here. And getting boots on the ground, spending some time in the area is a really good idea, especially if you can visit some different areas. Now, when people come, I love, giving them a list of, here are some parks to go visit. Here are the fun touristy things, museums, go to Pike Place Market downtown, check out Westlake Center, catch a show on the Fifth Avenue Theater, go to the Symphony Hall. There are sports games, right? Hockey, football, baseball. There are a lot of fun things to do here, which you might think of as touristy type of activities. And I'd be happy to give you a list of that if you want, just let me know. But I would also say that if you are thinking about moving here and living in a certain area, that you do some driving around and spending of some time in the suburbs or the neighborhoods or wherever you think is kind of on your short list that you might want to settle. And I encourage people, go to what do you do on the weekend? Do you go to the dog park? Do you go to the grocery store? Do you go to the library? Where do you like to spend your time? And spend some time doing those types of things while you're here in the neighborhoods that you're interested in. When you go to the library, is there a line of homeless people outside waiting for sandwiches and falling asleep using the computers? Or not. When you go to the grocery store, are there like drug dealers sitting in the parking lot, sending people in to steal food and then giving them drugs in exchange for the stolen food when they come out? And yes, I have heard about that happening in Everett, in a certain grocery store in Everett. So, funky stuff does happen. And it's good to know that that's happening before you decide to move there. Now, one kind of key, you can always call the police department. I recommend this. I used to give out a crime map. Apparently, I'm not supposed to be doing that. So call your local police department, but I would say areas of high density, downtown type of areas in any of the cities, Everett, Seattle, not so much Bellevue. Bellevue keeps it really clean, but those tend to be the areas where there's more problems. High traffic roads with a lot of stoplights and lots of cars going by, like Aurora Avenue, Highway 99 tends to be more of a collection of these problems. And then as you get away into the suburbs by the water to the nicer, more expensive neighborhoods, you'll see less and less of that. So what I would say is that you should look at the value of the properties. And typically, if they're very cheap and they're relatively close drive to Seattle, there's probably a reason that they're cheap. As we get farther and farther out, we get more into the suburbs, more into the rural areas, you're not going to be paying as much for property. So we expect things to go down. But if you're looking at a house, look at the Google Street View, look at the neighborhood, try to see, do other houses have cars in the driveway, junk, that type of thing? Are we close to a grocery store where people are leaving their shopping carts out? Are they breaking into cars and stealing stuff, package theft from the UPS man? These are the types of things that we are kind of aware of as issues of concern in these neighborhoods. So just do your due diligence on that. And even if you're looking at a house, like if you say, oh, I just saw this house with my real estate agent, this is great, I really want to buy it. Let's knock on the doors and talk with 5 or 10 neighbors and see what they think. Maybe airplanes are flying overhead and you're getting a lot of airplane noise. Maybe, 2 streets over is bad, but this street is okay. It's good to know the vibe and what the real local knowledge has to say about these things. So I really can't emphasize that enough, that if you are in town, if you are having a whirlwind tour, have fun at the museums, take your kids out to dinner, do fun stuff, but also get serious about researching these neighborhoods while you're on the ground. I do my best to research and share videos of street views as I drive through. So make sure you subscribe to my channel. Look for those other neighborhood tour videos. Ask me for them in the comments. If you want me to make you one specifically, I might be able to do that as well. So I'm always trying to build the library of what we have so you can really get a feel for boots on the ground. What is it like? Am I in the country? Am I in the city? Is there crime? Are there horses? Like, what's going on, to really help you know what you're getting yourself into when you move to the area. Another fun way to try to get an idea for some of these neighborhoods is to see if they are depicted in any shows or movies that you already watch. So there are a couple, like Grey's Anatomy, which is kind of the hospital soap opera drama show, and they actually came to Seattle to do some filming here, which I believe was for season 14. So if you like that show, go back and watch some of the reruns of season 14. You might be able to see some shots in surrounding areas of Seattle. Likewise, the old psychiatrist show, Dr. Frasier Crane from Cheers, they had a spin-off show called Frasier, and the cast came out here for episode 100 to do local film. So you can kind of watch that one and see what you think about the area. There was a movie back in the 80s called Harry and the Hendersons. Harry was a Bigfoot because, yes, we are famous for big feet. And a lot of people here actually embrace like Sasquatch culture. They have it on shirts and cars and coffee mugs. And I saw Sasquatch in the Olympic National Rainforest, whatever it is, on their bumper sticker. So we're the #1 state for Sasquatch sightings. That's another reason that you might want to move here. But they did make this movie about it, and it was set in Wallingford, I believe, which is kind of an eclectic artsy neighborhood north of downtown Seattle, north of Queen Anne and Magnolia. And fabulous, fun area. Lots of tourists like to go through there. And so that's where the family lived. And then they did a lot of the filming in our beautiful Cascade Mountains, Wenatchee National Forest to the east of us. So you can kind of get an idea of what some of the woods and the hiking trails and that type of thing would be like too. Just because you already wanted to, you could check out An Officer and a Gentleman again with Richard Gere. That was filmed in Bremerton and Port Townsend, which is on the Olympic Peninsula, right across Puget Sound from Seattle. So now you have an excuse for that one. And one more that you might want to check out, well, actually 2 more that you might want to check out. One is called Singles. So if you're really into music, Seattle actually had a huge music scene. Jimi Hendrix is from the area, Soundgarden, Nirvana. We had a big, especially in the 90s, grunge music scene. And so this movie is set in Seattle in the 90s. You could check that out. And then the last one that I was going to mention was It Happened at the World's Fair, which is an Elvis movie. And it's more of a historical look at kind of when the Space Needle was going in. It was built for the World's Fair in the 1960s. It has a revolving restaurant at the top that has now been taken out and replaced with a glass floor area. So you could be walking around up there and look straight down at the ground, very far away, which is a fun touristy thing to do as well. And don't forget about Sleepless in Seattle with Tom Hanks. Also took place in Seattle, and I believe he lived on a houseboat. So that's cool. You can check out Houseboat Life. There was also an MTV Real World series that took place where a lot of the kids worked at the Pike Place Market and lived in downtown Seattle. So these are just some fun kind of pop culture references if you want to go back and look through any of those shows to kind of get a feel for life on the ground in the Seattle area. Make sure you check those out. So question number 4, what other cities do people kind of consider or would be a trade-off between Seattle and something else? I get a lot of people who are, well, let's first of all say, Seattle versus Bellevue. I'm kind of treating those as the same. Seattle itself is only 700,000 people, but the metro area, I believe, is 3 or 4 million. So we have a big metro, and Bellevue is one of the cities in there that is an easy, 10, 15 minute commute in no traffic to Seattle. So that's all kind of one and the same in my mind. I think Tacoma, I would consider as a separate metro. Tacoma is going to be a lot less expensive. You've got the Army base down there. You have a downtown. You have a port. It's kind of like Seattle Junior, but it just never grew and took off in the same way that Seattle did. And there's also Olympia up there, which is the state capital. So kind of Seattle, Bellevue, Everett, one metro, and then Tacoma, Olympia, Lacey kind of down there as its own metro. That tends to be significantly less expensive than the Seattle area, but significantly more dicey in terms of crime as well. My brother-in-law grew up in that area. They had their own local cops show that was broadcast nationwide, which he thought everyone just had one in their town, but his was especially good because apparently there was a lot of crime going on. They had the Hilltop community, which is like the murder capital for a while. I think they've cleaned that up somewhat, but some shady stuff going on in Tacoma. So really use caution if you go into that area, that you go into a safe neighborhood. There's some wonderful neighborhoods and there are some sketchy neighborhoods, and it switches back and forth pretty quickly and frequently. So being unfamiliar with that area, you could accidentally buy on the wrong street in an otherwise nice area. So just be cautious with that. Portland is probably our other big competitor town. Also less expensive metro, known for beards and brews. The bros down there, flannel, wood jack lumbermen. I mean, the same style has come up here, but it's kind of what did they call it for a while? Like the metrosexual thing where you're like nicely groomed, but you have a full beard and you have the hair and the side and the flannel shirt, and you go axe throwing at the local pub. They have a great local brew culture and just a lot of, have you seen Portlandia? So just a lot of liberal politics there as well, similar to Seattle, but smaller and a little bit more localized with that politics within Portland, slightly more, I would say, conservative and farmy area closer into the city there. I haven't actually spent that much time in Portland, but it's beautiful, very close to the Columbia River, and a really nice place as well. Oregon has income tax though, and Washington doesn't. So I'm just saying. The other place we get a lot of people coming here from is California, and specifically Silicon Valley, because we have such a high IT employer concentration. Silicon Valley obviously does as well. So while a lot of the Menlo Park kind of primo campuses for these companies are down there in California, a lot of the satellite offices, and even I will say Amazon started here, Microsoft started here. We have our own claim to fame up here, right? So anytime you have that where there are a lot of types of workers of a certain industry, then the companies tend to concentrate there, and the employers and the employees kind of all trade and intermix. So I would definitely say we have a strong IT presence in the area as well. Some people come over from Minnesota. Maybe they're tired of the snow. There's sort of in Ballard that was founded by like Swedish and Norwegian fisher folk. And a lot of those same type of people were in Minnesota. So I don't know. I grew up Lutheran and there was always talk of like, oh, Minnesota, South Dakota, like there's some cultural things where people are going to be like farmers or fishermen. And then they had those industries back home, and these were areas that were being settled at the time that they were emigrating. I don't know what all the history was, but there seems to be a certain interconnection there. And also, I will say Phoenix. So if you want a hot, sunny spot to sunbird back and forth to, it's Seattle and Phoenix. And so we do get a lot of cross-population people moving in and out from there as well. People from Phoenix will say, I can't believe who would say this, but like, I'm tired of the sun. What? So they move back to Seattle after a while. It's not unusual. But anyway, that's number 4, kind of what some of the other cities are that people are considering when they're looking at Seattle and weighing their options. I'd love to hear where you are moving from and what other cities you are considering moving to. It's always nice for me to be able to build professional relationships with other realtors to help relocating clients and that type of thing. So I love to keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on with you guys so that I can make sure that I'm connecting up with the right resources in these various towns to help you out. And the last question is, what do other people say about moving to Seattle? So we're researching what other people think as well. And I want to share that with you. When I was actually using this little thing here, it's called Answer the Public. It gives you ideas of like what questions people have. And so this is one of the places I get ideas for my channel. A number of the questions were like, what does the Seattle Reddit say, what the Reddit community say about this? So I decided to take a peek at the Seattle Reddit thread and just see what people are saying. And I will say, caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. Sometimes these threads do tend to get a little bit negative. So keep that in mind. But the person is basically asking, hey, I'm planning to move here from Philadelphia to Seattle. And this thread is really depressing me. Like, is it really that bad? So let's see what the community says. Let's see what the public answers, and I'll weigh in as well if I think they're right or wrong. So this person admonishes, don't go just based on Reddit. Yes, it's a high cost of living, but we're still cheap compared to California. And I would say rent and housing costs tend to be the most like out of line, out of whack pricing variable. I've done other videos on the cost of living here, and maybe you pay a 10% premium for this or that compared to other parts of the world. If you're buying lunch in downtown Seattle, you're going to pay $10 or $15. As my husband who works at Amazon has found, which I'm like, why don't you just take a lunch? Which you could to save money, but you can make your own choices. It's really the housing costs that are the biggest squeeze on your budget. This guy wants to get back to Philadelphia. Okay, this person is saying that they think that there were previously nice areas that deteriorated rapidly and then rents went up really rapidly at the same time over the last 6 to 8 years. And what I will say, what I've observed, especially in the downtown Seattle, South Lake Union area, is that Paul Allen, when he was alive, maybe 10 to 20 years ago, spent a lot of time and money redeveloping that area. So he knocked down a lot of low-rise buildings, a kind of an underutilized area with old warehouses and manufacturing, and just kind of got rid of all of that and put up these huge skyscrapers, a lot of which Amazon then leased and brought in their employees. I think they have like 70,000 employees in the area or something like that working in these offices. And so we have less supply because buildings are getting knocked down, and we have more demand because employees are coming to the area. So when we have that mismatch of supply and demand, rents can go up quite a bit. And then, looking at the area, it's an older area. It might look like an old duplex to you, but it's worth $1 million. We don't want to just knock it down. So, when people find that they don't have to maintain things really well to get them leased and leased at a high rate, then they might not take as good care of their property as they should. So that's a dynamic that I think is self-correcting over time, but we certainly have seen rent price growth. A lot of people called me last year saying, I want to buy a house. My rent just went up by $400 a month and things like that. So you really do need to be cautious and plan ahead for your housing costs in particular. This person mentions that parks are getting overrun with homeless people. Is this a concern? Yes, especially in the city of Seattle, especially in these smaller pocket parks or urban green spaces kind of surrounded by city. My sister used to live in Ballard. This was probably about 10 years ago, and she found that a lot of car campers, which are homeless people living in cars and RVs, started permanently parking at the park next to her house. And as they were there, more garbage would be thrown out into the streets. Drug paraphernalia would be found by dog walkers early in the morning. And eventually she found a drug needle in her yard a couple blocks away. And her young son had just been born. And so that was kind of, the deciding moment for her that she needed to get out of there. And she moved to Shoreline and has had no further problems since then. I go to lots of parks and where it's not a problem at all, but it depends on the city, and the city of Seattle is especially lax. And some of these urban areas where the police just don't enforce, people tend to creep in, and you'll see sometimes people sleeping under a tree, in a tent. They might be lying on a park bench. Some odd things do tend to happen. So like I said, it's good to spend some time touring the area that you're interested in, spending time going to the places that you would go to see if that pertains to the particular neighborhood and area that you're most interested in. This person contends that there's not a do not go zone in Seattle, and somebody else says there is. Woodland Park, which is by Green Lake and the Zoo, Urban Park, 3rd Avenue, which is kind of a super shady drug dealing street in the middle of downtown Seattle, right next to the beautiful Benaroya Concert Hall and near Pike Place Market. So there are some areas, Pioneer Square, always been a little bit shady in certain areas that some people might not feel comfortable. Somebody else says, hey, I'm a single woman. I live in Queen Anne and I walk around my neighborhood and I have no problems. So I don't think that there's a really strong violent crime vibe anywhere, but there may be areas with people loitering, looking a little spaced out, lying around in a slovenly state, that type of a thing. And so depending on your tolerance level, typically the further out you go, the less likely that you're going to have that problem. Someone here suggests that Bellevue, Issaquah, and Redmond are not like that. And they said, you should go to these suburbs. Bellevue is actually a big city. They have skyscrapers there too. Redmond has Microsoft. I mean, any area east of Lake Washington is going to tend to have a much stronger discipline when it comes to crime and homeless people, graffiti, vandalism. There's just not as much of that going on the east side. So they've enforced it and they're not having problems with it. So east side, you're going to find fewer problems. You're also going to pay more money to live there. But if you can afford it, a lot of people like it and they have great schools as well. And this person says here, my partner and I moved to Seattle a year ago. We love it here. The place has its problems, but we're already ahead of the life we had in Louisiana. And I'm going to leave it at this one because I think this is a really good point. And a lot of the reason that we come to Seattle is to build a better life. We're having high paying jobs. We have a diverse economy. If one sector is soft, like right now, the tech sector is having some softness and layoffs, but we have airplane manufacturing, banking, coffee, retail, clothing, technology, and other, business support areas. It's all balances out because we have so much diversity here. And as such, and because it's such a beautiful area, we have a lot of property appreciation too. So once you buy a home, looking back over the last 40 years that I've been around, my dad has always said, we're in a bubble. We can't invest in more property. We're in a bubble. And it is more expensive to buy than it is to rent almost across the board. But part of the reason for that is people are buying with the expectation of future appreciation. So Now, I don't recommend like just buying and selling in 2 years. That's pretty risky. You don't know if the market will have gone up or down, and you do have costs of sale that are going to cost you money. But if you're planning on being here for 5 years or more, buying a property is definitely something that I would encourage you to consider. And I think it's an important part of wealth building. It's been a huge part of, my family's wealth. People who have lived here in the area for a long time, they may have no other assets except they're sitting on, a $3 million property that's paid off free and clear. So we have a lot of options to build wealth and to have a nice home and a wonderful lifestyle here in the Seattle area. And I would love to help you put that together or answer any questions that you have about it. Write to me in the chat, or if you'd like my help finding a home to buy or talking about different neighborhoods, feel free to give me a call or reach out to me on my website, homeproassociates.com. I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video, and thanks for joining me here today.